Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic, let's do it. Have you ever lived in a haunted house? What are your stories? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. In college, I worked some ungodly hours in the summer. Basically, from June to September, I was working 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. It was a brutal schedule, but I made really good money. One morning I woke up at about 4 a.m. like I usually did and headed off to work. I took mostly back roads there, always the same roads. I was driving along a familiar stretch of road that dips a bit where there is a swamp of marsh area. This one particular morning, there was quite a bit of fog hovering over the marsh area, and as the road dipped, I slowed down a bit. I glanced down to check the time, and when I looked back up, there was the faint outline of a little girl dressed in a white dress standing in the middle of the road. I had zero time to react, and I drove right through her. My heart dropped and my car made the most awful noise I've ever heard. The loudest thump it could possibly make. The car jolted upwards as if it was hitting a 3-foot-tall speed bump. I immediately pulled over and got out, expecting to see the worst. To my surprise and mostly confusion, I saw nothing. I spent probably 20 minutes looking at the side of the road under my car and in the ditch. I even walked a few steps in the marshy area. I found nothing. My car had no dents, marks, or blood on it. To this day, I can't really explain what happened. Everything felt so real. I don't tell this story to many friends or family because they only look at me like I'm crazy. This happened to my brother. He's sitting at the kitchen dining table at the apartment in New York. His back is to the hallway. His then 3-year-old daughter is kneeling on a chair across from him. He catches movement out of the corner of his eye, as if someone had just walked into the hallway from the kitchen. Instinctively, he turns around, and his daughter immediately says, "It's the lady." "What lady?" she says. "The nice lady." He then asks, "Do you see the lady?" At this point, he doesn't want to break the spell of the moment, so he decides to roll with it just to see how far she's going to take it. His daughter says, "Yeah." All along, she keeps playing with her toys on the table. He then asks, "Where is she now?" My niece says, "She's right there," and she's pointing at a spot on the floor right next to my brother by the table. He then asks, "Right here?" She says, "Yeah, she's got a boo-boo, a cut or a scrape." Next he says, "What's she doing?" My niece says, "She's gone." End of the exchange. My brother thinks it's weird, but kids are very imaginative, right? You can figure out where the story ends. Months later, the neighbors across the hall informed them that the previous occupant, a very old woman who lived alone in the apartment, passed away. My mom and I lived in a terribly haunted house. We had police reports and the story of the house given to us when we bought it. We had old hardwood floors that my computer chair would roll smoothly on, but make a huge commotion when heard downstairs. I'm away at a friend's house and my mom calls me hysterical, asking where I am. "You know where I am. I'm at so-and-so's. I've been yelling up the stairs for you to knock it off. Rolling around in that damn chair. You're not even home, blah blah blah." This was on a regular basis. Then we had my room. My room was so frightening that I eventually began sleeping on the couch. The attic was a small crawl space right next to my room, but to get to it, you had to move a bench away from the closet door, clear out the closet, open the attic door inside of the closet, and pull a string for the light. Once every couple of weeks, I would hear footsteps down the side of my room and see the attic light through a crack in the drywall. This incomprehensible fear would consume me every time I saw it. It was the type of fear that compelled me to hold my breath in order to ensure that no one hears me hiding. It was awful. I never slept with my back to my door. I have hundreds of stories. Our dogs are going apeshit, the washing machine door is filing violently open, and picture frames are suddenly dropping off the wall. We didn't really believe anything until then. Oh, and we had this big, comfy leather couch. I was sitting home alone watching Steve Wilkos when I heard the air from the couch cushions release. I looked over, and there was a perfectly formed dent from where someone had been sitting next to me, as if they had just gotten up. Nope. Went for a walk after that. I could go on. I don't believe in haunted houses, but I do believe in spirits. I believe that a spirit becomes rooted to a location for a specific reason. The fact that a house was built on it serves no greater meaning, but that's a different tale. Here goes. I was probably 9 or 10 years old, living with my parents, my only sister, older, and our then dog, a Cocker Shih Tzu mix named Lucky. It was a lazy summer morning. My parents are at work, me and my sister taking care of the chores. I was on laundry duty that day, so I was hanging the sheets on the wires in our backyard when I suddenly felt very scared. I mean, really scared for no reason. I wasn't thinking of anything particularly scary at the moment, so I didn't understand why I felt frightened. I tried to ignore it and keep the clothes hanging to dry, but the fear just kept getting worse. I actually felt ill in my stomach at some point. I considered calling my sister, but she'd just laugh at me for being a scaredy cat. When it got at its worst, I felt like I wanted to run away and hide somewhere, as if something terrible was hunting me. It took me years to understand that it was an instinctual call that all humans have. When we're faced with danger or extreme fear, our bodies warn us, even before our minds have processed what's going on. So, more scared than I've ever been, I continued hanging a large bed sheet and turn around, facing the walkway into the house. I suddenly see my dog, Lucky, walking towards me. I couldn't even scream. He was like an ephemeral being, wrapped in darkness. His eyes, completely dark normally, were shining in a bright red, staring straight at me. He was baring his teeth and growling in a way I haven't heard since. He started to run toward me, and about 3 feet before me, he vanished into thin air. I fell back, quickly regaining my footing, and bolted toward the house. My sister, who should have been in the kitchen making lunch, was nowhere to be found. I couldn't scream out to her. I was mute. I ran to her room and found her hiding under the blankets. I quickly crawled in, but retreated almost immediately. Our dog, Lucky, had been with her the whole time. When we calmed down, she told me that she felt really scared for some reason while washing dishes, and then she felt someone touch her lower back. When she turned, all she saw was a huge shadow with no distinct shape looming over her. She couldn't scream. She felt mute, she said. Our dog was with her, whimpering all morning. She grabbed him and hid under the sheets until I showed up. It was one of the most terrifying and mysterious moments of my life. Many others have transpired after, but the fact that it happened when it was young definitely influenced me. I know that now I'm an adult. Our parents never believed us. My husband and I lived in a 150-year-old house that had been split into 2 apartments, top and bottom. We lived upstairs. The back bedroom was always creepy, kind of dark and cold, but we attributed that to it being an old house surrounded by trees. At the time, I was in college, so I was up late working while my husband slept. I had left my empty teacup on the desk next to me. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw the cup move about 6 inches and heard it scrape on the desk, too. I didn't really get freaked out, though. My cat happened to be sitting nearby and came over, put his paws on the desk and sniffed at the cup. Then he proceeded to freak the fuck out. Every hair in his body stood up, and his tail quadrupled in size. Then he tore ass out of the room at top speed. Needless to say, I ran out screaming and jumped on the bed with my husband crying. I avoided that room at all costs, and we moved out a few months later. I recently learned that the house is a spa or bed and breakfast, and that room is a guest room. My sorority house is supposedly haunted. The story goes that she was a pledge of the house that used to be there. At the time, we were renting from them. Now we own it. And she was injured during a pledge prank and died in one of the bedrooms. I lived in that bedroom for half of my sophomore year. There were some freaky things that happened, but they could be attributed to faulty wiring. The sorority we rented from wanted us out of the house because they wanted to eventually come back on campus. So they were terrible about maintaining the building and things like that. Several of my sisters claimed they saw the ghost, but I never did. I was afraid to go into the attic or basement alone, though, for the entire 3 years I lived in that house. Also, haunted or not, it made my chapter famous. I was at headquarters a few years ago, and when they found out what chapter I was from, they went, "Isn't that the haunted house?" I used to stay at a friend's house a few years ago. He used to complain his house scared him. He lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere. My mom's side of the family used to live in a farm nearby that was haunted, so it wasn't anything new to me when he told me about being scared there. I've always believed in ghosts, but have only ever been scared by them a few times. His house felt strange. His family lived on the top floor and his grandparents lived on the bottom. I always felt strange going into the house, but it wasn't scary, and I always thought it was from all the dust and because it was an old farmhouse. I was at his house one night. We were fighting over his computer as it just had dial-up, and we both wanted to use it. Nothing new. We both looked up suddenly and jumped out of our skins. The wallpaper on the walls and ceilings was falling down on top of us. I blinked, and everything was back to normal. Nothing was falling, and nothing had moved. I looked at my friend, he looked at me. We both just asked if we saw that. Both said yes, and then went back to fighting over the computer. Another time, we were in the house alone, apart from his little brother, who we were looking after. His brother was fast asleep, and we went to bed around 1 or 2 a.m. I woke up in the night. Someone had turned the hallway lights on, and a woman I didn't recognize was standing in the doorway. I just thought his parents had brought a friend back, and went back to sleep. I woke up again, and she was still standing in the doorway. She was pale, very skinny, and had black curly hair. She just stared at me. Again, I didn't think anything of it. I got up in the morning and asked my friend if he saw the woman. He went pale and said yes. We asked his parents who they had brought back with them last night. They said no one. We asked if the mom was playing with a black wig. She said no. There were always strange noises while I stayed in that house. Always a light turning on or something when it shouldn't. I wasn't scared of whatever it was, but my friend was. What was a little creepy was his little brother a few times when we were looking after him would wake up in the night, would fall out of bed, bunk bed, which would wake any normal kid up, but he would just walk out of his room and talk to someone in the valley. My most recent encounter was on Friday. I had to visit my mom for the first time in ages. We had decided to go shopping, and were walking to the train station. The easiest way into the city takes half the time. We got across this road, and I and my mom noticed a man walking toward us. He was dressed in old military gear. I watched him as he got closer and moved out of his way to let him pass. He walked between me and my boyfriend and carried on around the corner. I watched him until he was out of sight. Then asked my mom if she had just seen that. She said yes. My boyfriend hadn't seen him. He didn't see the man at all. My mom just went pale. I just shrugged it off. No big deal to see things. He wasn't scary. He just didn't feel right, like he shouldn't have been there. In my mom's house as a kid, strange things happened. One of the things I remember most was waking up one morning. It was a sunny morning. I opened my eyes and there was a big black hooded figure standing next to my bed. I did what any kid would do and hid under the duvet. My heart was pounding in my chest. Once that died down, I eventually emerged, and whatever it was had vanished. I got straight out of bed and ran into my mom's room and woke her up. Nothing was in the house. Another time, in the same room, I was fast asleep when a strange sound woke me up. Then I felt it. One of my soft toys, this big bear, climbed over me and grabbed the bear off the floor. But it didn't move. I knocked all my soft toys apart from Tuesday out of my room. I kicked my soft toys apart from Noah out of my room the next day. The last thing I remember in that house was when I got home from school one day. Normally I would turn on the TV before I went to the toilet, but I was desperate and ran straight upstairs. I did look, and the TV was completely unplugged. I thought I could just turn it on and quickly run, but there wasn't time to mess with the plugs. Additionally, I had locked the door behind me when I got home because I was going to be home alone for the next few hours. I guess I was 8 or 9 at the time because we didn't have Sky TV. Anyway, I'm doing my thing when my stomach drops in fear. The downstairs TV had just come on its own. I stayed still, not wanting to investigate. I listened quietly as the volume on the TV was turned right up to max. I quickly finished up and edged out of the bathroom. I crawled down a few stairs and looked into the living room. There was no one in there. I eventually plucked up the courage to go downstairs after I ran and grabbed my turbo morpher from my room. I walked down and turned the TV off. Silence. I checked the entire house. Nothing was there. All the doors and windows were shut and locked. There was no way the TV would have plugged itself in and turned itself on, but it had done so. I just turned the TV back on and watched it until my mom came home. It didn't happen again, and my mom dismissed the story. Now at work, I see things sometimes. People have reported leaving lights on when they unlock in the morning. Initially, I thought I was imagining a dark figure coming out of the corner of my eye upstairs. However, I began to notice kids frequently saying things like, "I don't like it up here, can we go?" This phenomenon occurred more than a few times per week. A few times, this little kid will just vanish back downstairs and will scare the parents half to death. Whatever it is, it likes to mess with me sometimes. However, when I tell it to leave me alone, it doesn't bother me for a while. What does bother me? Being in the staff area upstairs. I can feel its presence, and it's not a pleasant sensation. I was locking up one night, doing all the checks. I turned everything off and went to make sure no one was in the boys' toilet. It was all clear. I turned off the lights and pulled the door nearly closed before something ripped the door out of my hands, and it slammed open again. I just got out of there, grabbed my bike from the landing, and left quickly. Didn't bother finishing my checks. One night I completed all the checks and turned off all the lights. I go to grab my bike from the landing and look back because I feel like something is watching me. A black figure is standing in front of the girls' toilet. I just watched me. I look away just thinking I was tired. I picked up my bike, booked again, and the damn thing was still standing there. I just walked down the stairs and left. I had a problem one night when I locked up and left the upstairs lights on. I don't leave the lights on, even when I go upstairs these days. I tend to turn all the lights off, just habit. It's happened a few times now. I told one of the guys to stop fussing over it. It wasn't anything we had done. He had locked up the night before, and I found lights on as we went upstairs the next day. He was sure he had turned them all off. So I told him about the thing up there, and all he said was, "So you've seen it too?" No big deal to me. Really, I just told him to let it be and leave him alone if it bothers him, and left it at that. I don't want to scare everyone. I prefer the good ghost stories, or visits, or some type of thing that relates to the family itself as more a guardian angel or protective spirit versus the more malicious ones, like a poltergeist type movie. But anyway, I don't know. Again, still am happy to have never experienced any of this, but for those that have, it's pretty cool. Keep it up. I grew up in a haunted house. My childhood friends even called it that. Really, it's an old Victorian hotel that my parents bought and renovated. The plot of the land it sits on, as well as the structure itself, holds a lot of history. As a child, I would find Native American arrowheads, chunks of pottery from various eras, old bluegrass medicine bottles, and all sorts of cool things on the property. Regular haunted house occurrences experienced by my family included items going missing. Sometimes things would disappear for weeks, and then you'd find them again in random and unexpected places. We could have just been a bit scatterbrained as a family, and at one point we did find a squirrel nest in the wall filled with shiny human objects. However, I do remember being in my late teens when I put a teacup down on the coffee table, turned to attend to something, and when I turned back moments later, my teacup was sitting on a shelf across the room. I stared at it dumbfounded. This happened in the middle of the day. Ghost cats. Yes, you heard me correctly. I grew up with many cats around. They all, after long happy lives as country house cats, passed away. I'd see cats out of the corner of my eye constantly when I visit that house. After we lost a particularly special cat, my mom and I were sitting at the kitchen table. The bowl of dry cat food still sat in the corner full of food. During a lull in the conversation, we both heard clearly the sound of a cat munching on dry food. We looked at each other, then at the bowl of food. No cat. A feeling of love washed over me. That was our kitty, letting us know he was okay and still around in some way. When I was very small, I was terrified to brush my teeth because of the old woman in the closet of the third-floor bathroom. I don't feel her today, but I remember vividly the feeling that I would get when I knew she was watching me. Then there was the shadow mom at the top of the steps. I once fell through him, and it was an extremely surprising feeling. Not very scary until I thought about it later. This man did not like one of the boyfriends I brought home in high school. Said boyfriend refused to come up to my room because the man on the stairs does not like me. The man on the stairs was right about that guy. Thanks, ghost friend. My dad's house has a ghost that mainly stays just in the basement. The ghost is a male in his 30s. Well, at least he was when he died, and hasn't really done anything to me. The problems I had were that there would be times when I was in the kitchen cleaning dishes or making some food, and I could feel him on the staircase to the basement. I'd panic and run into my room and feel him behind me but stop at my room. I'm not the only one who can feel him there, because my stepmom's sister even said there was one in the basement while she was visiting. I still haven't told anyone about it though. Another time is when my great-grandmother passed away. It was sad, but it didn't really hit me hard because I knew it was her time. For a while after her death, I could feel her presence around me, regardless of whether people were home or not. Either people were home or not. I couldn't even see her unless I closed my eyes, and it was just her smiling at me. I know she meant no harm, but I just didn't want to handle that situation. Anyway, apart from her feeling her near me, I would also have very strange dreams about her. One dream was of my brother and my grandmother, her daughter, sitting in my grandmother's living room, and I looked over the dark window to see my great-grandmother's face, and the walls started covering in blood-red letters. making out a note. Another was of us going out to a forest in the middle of nowhere, a beautiful forest that was mystical, and there was this tomb there that was made of marble and was like a fairy tale, and we buried her, and then as we left, the entire forest was covered in snow. I say snow because I don't know if it were her ashes or if it was actually snow. I did. When I was 4, my brother was born. We think a ghost followed him home from the hospital or something. It wanted to harm my brother. My room has a built-in wardrobe, albeit a tiny one, and my parents' room has one as well, which are adjacent to each other. Anyway, I had bunk beds in my room and I slept in the top one. My older brother slept in the bottom one, but he was only here on weekends, and one night I could see a shadowy figure standing at the door of the wardrobe. I was terrified as it stood there for a few hours. Then my parents went to bed, and my new brother slept in between them. I guess they didn't have a crib for him at the time, and then after half an hour or so, he walked through my wardrobe and into my parents' room. This went on for about 4 days. I kept telling my parents, but they said nothing, but they looked at each other with that look. They knew what I was talking about. The same thing happened the next night, but a couple of minutes after it went in, I heard my dad shouting, telling it to leave us alone and to go away. That was the last I ever saw of it. Turns out this ghost was pushing my parents when they were in bed, trying to roll them on top of my baby brother. But when my dad yelled at the other one, another ghost came in through their door and held the bad ghost by the hand for a while, and they just disappeared. They were an old couple. And more recently, I believe I spoke to my dead grandfather. He died when I was a few months old. I had never even seen a picture of him before. Then I wake up to see somebody in the chair in my room. He tells me he's my granddad, and we talk for a while. He asked me questions about how everyone's doing and how I'm getting on at school and stuff. I asked if I was even awake. He told me I was. Then he got up, opened my bedroom door, and left. I fell asleep and woke up and my door was still open. I asked my family if anyone had opened my door that night. They said no. I asked if there were any pictures of my granddad. Mom dug them out and sure enough, it was him. I didn't tell my parents about it though. I just kept that little memory for myself. Whether it was a dream or not, I'm still not sure, but I'll always remember it. So yeah, one good ghost memory and one bad one. Old house in Kentucky. I would hear a ball or something similar rolling up and down the hall at the time. There were cold spots near the back of the house. My mother, who's a woman of science, would not go in the house. I was sitting alone on the couch and saw a dark red-headed girl with a white Victorian dress in the doorway. Well, that image is classic horror movie stuff. So I figured I just saw it in the back of my mind and went on about my business. I told no one. My boyfriend wakes me up in the middle of the night saying that he saw someone at the end of the bed. I asked him to describe it to me, and he started describing what I had seen earlier. We got the hell out of there for a couple of days. I asked my elderly neighbor if she knew anything odd about the house, and she smiled and went inside and closed the door. My mother told one of her friends who had lived on the street when she was a child, and she said she knew all about the little girl ghost. I can't help but be a believer after all that shit. End of story. I politely told the girl to stop showing up because she was scaring me, and she did. I'll make this short. A 6-year-old woke up to see an older, kind of ugly woman leaning against my dresser smoking a cigarette. It was dark, and even though my mom hasn't smoked a day in her life, I called out, "Mom?" No response. She just kept smoking. I could see the red glow of the tip and the smoke swirling around. She said nothing. Just watched me sleep. She wasn't that scary. I just went back to sleep and assumed it was my mother. The next day I asked my mom why she was smoking in my room. She obviously was very confused. Second incident, age 6. My sister and I were sleeping in our basement because it was hot. I woke up randomly terrified and had the strongest urge to go upstairs and get out of the basement as fast as I could. I ran upstairs with my sister to find one of our fans had caught on fire and flames were up to the ceiling. I didn't smell smoke or hear the fire when I was sleeping. I know something woke me up on purpose. My whole house would have burnt down if I hadn't woken up. Third incident, age 6. I was sleeping in my sister's bed, facing out into the hallway. A little red glowing dot appeared in the darkness out in the hallway, and then smoke started swirling around. The red glow moved all around like it was dancing. I'm assuming it was the smoking lady who didn't show herself, but only her cigarette, and wanted to play with me. I found it amusing. I wasn't scared. I just went back to sleep. That's all I really remember happening. I was not a very imaginative kid. I didn't have any imaginary friends or was very silly. I was boring. I remember to this day at 25 what I saw. We moved out of that house when I was 10.